I aim to motivate and inspire viewers to see the clothes they wear as an expression of their personality and their beliefs. This is the Slow Wardrobe. Come and have a look. Hello, welcome to episode 31 of the Slow Wardrobe podcast. My name is Linda and I am your host. I have some knitting to share with you this week. I'm also going to show you how I apply a cable to some existing stocking stitch knitting retrospectively. And in the Layercake section, I talk about proportions as usual, but also how to balance different colors with each other in different parts of your clothes and how to layer, in some cases, knits underneath your layer cakes rather than over the top of them. Let's dive in with the knitting. So I actually have a finished project to show you. Hasn't happened very often, has it? I think I'm a bit overly happy about it. Okay, they're a pair of socks and they come with a bit of a story. Well, first of all, you've seen these socks in progress multiple times and they're finally finished and they're going to be back on my feet. Halfway through the knitting, my husband was like, ooh, I think I deserve a pair of new socks. So I was like, all right, because I really like the colouring of them. I think I said in a previous episode, they kind of remind me of Delft tiles, the Dutch blue and white tiles. I'll show you an example of it here. And this yarn was dyed by a Dutch dyer, Saskia, from Jawohl, Rotterdam, and somehow that connection, the fact that it was Dutch, that association, I wanted these socks to be for me. And so they will be, because I hope you remember that I showed you that I knitted them 2 at a time. I didn't enjoy that very much, and it turns out my gauge is tighter when I knit 2 at a time than when I knit on double pointed needles. Double pointed needles are my favorites. I'm fast on double pointed needles and I knit looser. The result is that the standard 60 stitches that I normally put on for a pair of hand knitted socks that I knit on 2¼ needles that either need to fit me or my husband turned out not to be enough for him. He's got big long feet, so I made long socks, and because they are that little bit tighter, he can't really comfortably get them over his heel. And if you see them like that, they actually do look very, very narrow, don't they? It's a little bit better towards the toe. You can actually see a difference. If I hold them up, then from about here onwards, the gauge gets looser. Can you see that? Yeah, it's from about here. So the gauge up on that top half is tighter, and then here it gets looser. That's because I got so fed up with the 2 at a time on circular needles knitting that I ended up pulling out the rest of the double knitted sock blank, making 2 separate little balls, and then was able to transfer my knitting to double pointed needles. And that's how big the gauge difference is. I didn't actually realize how big it was until I just looked at it. But the result is that especially around this heel area and around the ankle, they are so tight that they're not comfortable on his feet. Yay! Means that they're mine again. I get my, now of course I could have said from the start, no, I want to keep these for myself, you get some different ones. But I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff. He gives me the puppy eyes and then I just melt. So same goes for this sock. This section is tighter and then that tip is looser. Not a problem for me because I've got wide feet anyway. So they're actually really comfortable on my feet. So they're my socks. Finished object. Hooray, finally. On to my works in progress. I actually have two, well, I've got more pairs of socks on the go that I have at home that I've kind of abandoned. But I've got two recent objects that I'm working on. The first is a pair of socks that is not very far along yet. They're going to be for my daughter's boyfriend. He is conservative in his color choices, and as a result, I've gone for a very plain, very safe choice for the yarn. And I started knitting and they come out rather nice. It's a lovely marled fabric. And I thought, you know, once these are finished, how is anybody going to tell that these are hand knitted socks? They're also not very exciting to knit, which is great when I'm watching TV, for example, or listening to a podcast and I just want to knit. Who doesn't in these times? But I thought, you know what? The way I can really turn them into a hand knit is by adding something special to them. So I decided to add some cables. The thing is, I had knitted almost 4 inches already without any cables, so I had to add the cables retrospectively, which I've done. I then talked about that on Instagram and somebody said, oh, how do you do that? How on earth do you do that? So I thought, I show you. And that's what the next section of the podcast is going to be about. I'll put timestamps at the bottom where it starts and stops. So when you get to that section and you think, this is no use to me, I already know how to do this, or I'm not interested, then I'll show you right at the beginning how far to scroll ahead to get to the Layercake section of the podcast. So what I've done here is I put 2 cables next to each other. They start with 2 purl stitches, then a 4-stitch cable, then another 2 purl stitches, another 4-stitch cable, and another 2 purl stitches. So in total, it is 2, 6, 10, 14 stitches that have been, that's almost all the stitches on one needle, 14 stitches that have been replaced by a double cable. And I will get that double cable to run on the outside of the leg, just the side of the leg. So I'll probably end up redistributing my stitches so that this point becomes the outside edge and ensure that that's where the cable ends up with. So I'll end up with the half point, a midway point between heel and top of the foot being in between those 2 cables. That's my idea anyway. But I'll see how I go. That's the plan at the moment. It's very easy to work with and I'm really enjoying knitting them because they're so easy. And even the cables, when it's not very light and I'm doing something else at the same time, I don't have a problem doing those. And in one of my lovely, lovely Trava and Wool project bags, of course, that was that one. The next one, I've only just started. This is a West Yorkshire Spinners Christmassy yarn. I think it's called Starry Night. It's a sparkle yarn in nice dark blues. I've literally just set up the cuff. Look, I haven't got anything to show for yet. Just set up the cuff and I've just knitted the first 1 or 2 rounds after the setup, and these are going to be for my daughter. So her boyfriend is getting the grey socks and she's getting the blue sparkly ones, both for Christmas. And I'll see how I go with knitting for my other family members, because there are so many other projects that I'm keen to work on, including the jumper that I started at the beginning of this year that is still not finished, the stripy jumper. I keep promising to work on it and then I do something else again. So I do apologize for my fickle nature. This is in another pretty Trava and wool bag. This is the bag that I bought from myself so to ensure that the proceeds were still going to go to the charity that I was supporting with the sale of these bags. And last but not least, my progress on my WestKnits Mystery Knit Along. It is a typical WestKnits monster shawl, as those of you who are working on one already know. And I reached the point yesterday at the end of the last clue where I had to decide whether I was going to make the smaller version, which meant one repetition of 3 stripes of the border, or the larger version, which means 2 repetitions of the 3 stripes. Now I'm dead keen to get on with other projects, so I thought, I'll just do one. And then I thought, you know what, I'm always going on about proportions. I really want the proportions of this shawl to be perfect. And how can I ensure that I'm happy with those proportions? So I took some sneak peeks at people who've already finished their versions. And I thought, well, most of the finished ones will probably have 1 repeat of that edge, because we're working with about 950 stitches per row, so it's quite a job to do just 1 row, which is why of course the temptation is big to leave it at 1 repeat of the 3 colors. Then I looked at some finished shawls and I thought, in terms of balance, I really like it better if there's a double row, a double band of those 3 colors. So I will try and hold up. I'm in the middle of a row, so this is not going to be very demo friendly, but I'm going to try and show, without pulling stitches off my needles, what this shawl is looking like so far. If you don't want to see this, I'll show you right here how far to scroll ahead way past it, and come out at the other end for the demo of the application of cables after the event. Right, this was clue number 1, followed by number 2. That's what I'm holding up now. That's number 2. Then we have these beautiful, of course it'll open up a little bit more when I block it better. I've done a bit of blocking with a warm iron. The next clue has got these pretty rows with the chevrons on top. Then we get a lovely piece of slip stitch knitting that is a bit more geometric again, just like this clue was. So we're getting another band of that here with the big slip stitches. Then come the application of a line of triangles. You'll see some bits sticking out because I haven't finished binding off all my ends. So there's a row of these caramel colored triangles, followed by the first repeat of these chevron shaped stripes. They're turned into chevrons by these slipped stitch lines there on either side of the triangle, and then stitches in between end up dipping down. So these are going to be points. Is that visible? So I've got 1 of each color 1, 2, 3, And I'm repeating the first color again because I am going to go for the double chevron, even though it may take me another week to find the time to knit them. I think it's going to be that much more impactful for it. And then I'll see whether my husband might be interested in this shawl, or maybe I will wear it myself. It'll be an interesting combination with the neutral check that is the linen that I've recently introduced, the new linen color, and I'm still besotted with. It'll be an interesting combination to have those neutral colors with this beautiful dark midnight blue. For those of you who are seeing this for the first time, this is Moonless Midnight on my yak silk base that's hanging right there. The other colors are all Soliloquy merino silk, and interestingly enough, even though the yak silk is a standard 4-ply and the merino silks are 3-plies, so they run 600 meters per 100 grams. I have found that the fabric that they make together is just heavenly. It's got enough structure, and the presence of the yak silk and the way the yak silk in that main color is used gives enough structure to the fabric for the thinner yarns to play very nicely and make supple but still even bits of knitting in between. So I'm thrilled with how it's come out. I have no idea how big it's going to be in total. It's going to be sizable. At the moment, my top edge, my top edge is about, if I pull it like this, will that be about 2 foot, 2 and a bit. So it's not huge in terms of wingspan, but because it kind of fans out, if you've seen the ones that have been finished, it goes almost horseshoe shaped because of the way the increases work. So it's a sizable piece of knitting once it's finished. But I like the fact that the top edge is not going to be huge. It's not going to be very schlanket-like, as Stephen calls them. It's not that much of a blankety shawl, I think, in total. Apologies for all the clacking. Those are my multiple stitch markers, all my stitch markers, some of which come out of an advent calendar, a stitch marker advent calendar that I bought a couple of years ago from Untitled, and I recommend those. They're lovely. I don't know if she's definitely doing them this year, but I don't know whether she's already sold out of them. I'll find out and tell you in the down bar. But that's my last work in progress in my beautiful midwinter project bag. I love these project bags because you can fold them all the way up like this and use them to their full capacity if you've got a big project like this. But if you've got something smaller, of course, you can then roll them up and then tie them around and close them, and they'll still be neat. I strongly recommend these. I think I've given them a plug, multiple plugs in the past. I love them. So that's it for the knitting this week. No, it isn't. That's it for my whips and my FOs this week. Let me show you now how to add a cable to a piece of stocking stitch knitting after the event. And if you're not interested, just scroll ahead to that point as you see down there, and that'll take you to the start of the Layercake section. Have fun! I will show you in this video how to add a cable retroactively to a piece of plain stockinette stitching. I'd actually started the video already and showed how to turn these two, what were stocking stitches or knit stitches, into purl stitches. But the camera angle was not very good, so I've changed that, and I'm now going to show exactly the same thing again on the other side of the cable. What I'm going to show you is a cable that consists of 2 purl stitches, then 4 cable stitches, and then another 2 purl stitches. So I'll put the cable stitches in last. I'm going to, on the left side of what's going to be a 4-stitch cable, now add 2 purl stitches, or rather change the next 2 knit stitches into rows of purl stitches like I've done here. The way to do that is I'm going to move the 4 what will be cable stitches onto my right hand needle so I can get to the 2 stitches that need changing. I'm going to drop the first one and drop it all the way down to the start of the section that will have the cable. So I'm literally going to pull out a stitch at a time all the way to the bottom, and you can see the ladder appearing here. It's also possible when you do a section like this to drop all the stitches of the entire section at the same time, but if you've never done this before, if you're new to this, then make it easy, keep it easy for yourself by doing 1 stitch at a time. The advantage of doing 1 stitch at a time is that you don't have a long ladder that it goes across a number of stitches and have to redistribute that yarn to end up with nice and even tension. Because these little ladders are only 1 stitch wide, you don't have to distribute their length across multiple stitches. So I'm going down to the last stitch of the previous section. You can see it sitting here, a knit stitch. I'm going to leave that as it is. And now, instead of knitting the next stitch back up, which would be easy by just putting it underneath the little loop, either with a knitting needle or with a crochet hook. If you use a crochet hook for this, you can just put your crochet hook through the first stitch, grab the little loop, and then pull the crochet hook back like I'm knitting it now. I've chosen to do this with knitting needles, so bear with me on that. Now, it's really a personal preference whether you do this with knitting needles or a crochet hook, or depending on what you've got. I very often do this with the needles that I'm actually knitting the work with, by pulling them through a bit at the top, putting the rest of my stitches on the cables, and then using the needle tips to re-knit a section. What I did here was make a knit stitch, but of course we want to turn it into a purl stitch. So I'm going to take it back out, going to stick the needle through the stitch so that I don't lose it, because I'm going to turn my work. Ignore the black thread, we're not using that at all for this section. So here's my needle stuck through the stitch. So I'm going to use my other needle to bring the face of my work here. So there's my little stitch ready to be knitted now, because then it turns into a purl stitch in the front. It just makes it easier. It allows you to do it this way. It allows you to have your needles in the front of your work, because you're knitting on the back, which automatically of course means purling in the front. So as you see, I just grab each subsequent rung of the ladder and pull it through the stitch on my left needle. Grab a knit, grab a knit, grab a knit, the rest of your work can just hang there, support it a bit with your hands to make this easy. I'll speed up a little bit now to make this section less boring. There it is. My working yarn is competing. There's my working needle. So I've got my new purl stitch on my little help needle, and I'll transfer it to the right hand needle like so. If I now put my little needles down and look at the work, I've got a whole new little row of purl stitches going up. As you can see, some of them are nicely in the middle, some of them are sitting to one side a little bit. It all will right itself. When you pull and push the work a little bit, they kind of all even out. So don't worry about that, as long as they're in the right direction, in the right sequence, I mean, and they're all purl stitches. I'm going to do another one, do exactly the same again for the second purl stitch, and then we'll do the cable. Feed my needles through a little bit. Use one of my little help needles to pull my stitches out. The size of these little help needles that I've chosen doesn't really matter. Same with a crochet hook, it doesn't have to be exactly the right size. When in doubt, go slightly thinner than your normal working size. Don't go thicker, because that just makes it more difficult to grab stitches. So the same size as what you're working with, or thinner. I'm working with size 4.5. I think this is a size 3mm. Doesn't really matter that much. So I've gotten to the bottom, put that stitch on my needle so I don't lose it, turn my work around, find the stitch, transfer it to my other needle, pull it off, bring my needle around, and we're going to repeat exercise. Pick up a loop, knit it, pick up a loop, knit it, pick up a loop, knit it, all the way up to the top again. What you can see here, actually, just to show you, is that some of my purl stitches that I've just made look really big, and that makes my little ladders a little narrower. Doesn't matter, it will work itself out. They will all find their place again. It's just how the string is curling, because you've just turned these stitches from knit stitches into purl stitches. When you're not sure which loop to pick up, just open up your work a bit, read your stitches. That's your new row of stitches that you've just made previously, and here's your working stitch, and here's your little ladder. And now we have a row of 2 purl stitches all the way up on either side of a 4-stitch panel. Now we're going to turn these guys into cables. The way to cable stitches is to swap them in place. for that we have to go all the way down with all 4 stitches. There's no other way about it. So we put our 2 purl stitches back on the left hand needle, drop all 4 of the knit stitches, keep the other purl stitches on the needle. Let's put these nicely, pull these nicely through, and now we're going to drop all 4 of our cable stitches. See, now we're getting a long ladder. The way to tell which of your ladders, if they're long, is next in line is to just look at where and how they attach. You can see that, I need to take my working yarn out of the way. You can see that your last stitch is here, and then the lowest place where you have a ladder attached is here. That's your next ladder. We're not there yet though. We're going to keep going. We're going to put a whole row of cables in here. Here we are at the bottom. 4 live stitches. You normally don't put a cable all the way at the bottom. I'm not going to either, but I've pulled this all the way back just to show you how to put these guys back in place before we start cabling. So I'm going to add strange black hair here, and I'm going to pull out of my work. I'm going to add a couple of more rows back before we do the first cable. So I pick up my 4 stitches, I find my lowest ladder, here it is, and I'm going to knit these 4 stitches back in. I'm going to treat that ladder like a normal working yarn. Doesn't matter, hold it with your left or right hand, however you prefer. The strange thing is, of course, that this is a loop. It doesn't, it's attached on the left, and we need to distribute that loop across the 4 stitches, but we still need to make them the normal way. So you still have to go around your needle, pull through and let it slip. Next stitch, around your needle, and of course you've got less and less yarn to work with. This ladder is getting smaller, so it's fiddly, but it works fine. 3 and 1 left. I'm going to just do it like that rather than pulling it around my right hand needle. Now I've knitted these 4 stitches. I'll put them back on my left needle, and I repeat the exercise one more time, and then we'll put our first cable in. So I find my next lowest ladder, and I knit 4 stitches. Go around the needle so that my stitches end up lying in the right direction. 1 stitch, 2, 3, and then for my last one, a little ladder, just pull the stitch over, back again. And when you go back and forth, of course you can redistribute the sizes of the stitches a little bit if you find that you've got a little bit extra yarn here, or that you're a bit tight there, or whatever. You can distribute them. It doesn't come very closely. With a bit of pushing and pulling at the end, they will all right themselves. So now we're going to turn things around, aren't we? We're going to cable, so we're going to bring these 2 guys in front of the other 2. One way to make this very easy if you use small needles like this is to use double pointed needles, because then I would just be able to slip these stitches to the end and put these stitches in from the other end. Let me see if I've got a couple of double pointed needles to show it to you that way. Found one in one of the whips that I've got lying ready for this episode. So what I want to do is to bring these two stitches over in front of these other two. So if I put these guys on a double pointed needle, the first two stitches on a double pointed needle, like that, they can sit in the back. I'm going to transfer these because I haven't got them on a double pointed yet. Transfer these so I can swap them, bring them over in front of your first two and swap them in place. So I've effectively cabled those 4 stitches without knitting them yet. I've just swapped them. The 2 that were on the left are now on the right and the other way around. Now I can knit them. I do the same thing again. I find my next ladder and knit 1, 2, 3, and the last one, 4. Now, one thing to remember is that this is a piece of knitting knit on 4.5mm needles, and I've got, I think, a 2.5mm needle in my left hand and a 3mm needle in my right hand. So I have to be careful not to knit too tightly. So if I move these stitches back onto my left needle, I can make each of them a little bit bigger and pull, a little bit bigger and pull, and that will end up redistributing that ladder across my 4 stitches. Now I can knit the next ladder because it'll be a couple of rows before I'm going to cable again. 1, 2, 3, and the last one, 4. Pull them through nice and generously. Find your next ladder. Here it is. Push the others aside a little bit. Knit the next 4 stitches again. 1, 2, 3, last one, 4. Redistribute on my way back. So I've made my first cable. You see them coming across here, and I've knitted in effect 2 rows after I cabled. So let's make a cable after every 6 rows. Cable 1, 2, 3, 3 more rows. Last row. and move them back. Cable, 6 rows. Next cable. Repeat exercise. Bear with me while I slide stitches around because I'm not working with a double pointed needle. So again, I put my 2 first stitches in the back. I put my left 2 stitches in the front. Move them across because I haven't got them on a double pointed. And place them in front of my first 2 stitches without twisting them anywhere. Repeat the exercise. 6 rows now after my cable. So I have now done this 1, 2, 3 times. You can count your connecting loops if you want. If you've forgotten how many rows you've done since you've cabled, then you look at your crossover stitch and you count the loops that connect that crossover stitch to the next stitch. 1, 2, 3. So we need to do 3 more. I'll speed up a bit. Six in total. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're going to do our next cable. Leave the first 2 stitches on the double pointed needle. The second 2 stitches are going to cross over in the front. Sorry, hit the camera there. Move them across. There we go. And we're going to knit another 6 rows. I'll speed all the way through now until I'm right back at the top or close to it, because you're getting the hang of it, I think. Let me just show you a different technique there. So instead of putting see, I just have my left finger underneath the ladder and I hook the stitch through. There are lots of different ways to do this. Do whatever makes things easier for you. Here's another one. My ladder is lying on my left needle. I go over and move it. I pick the ladder with my left needle. With my right needle, I move over and slide it across. Move over and slide it across. Move over and slide it across. Back again. I've done 5 rows. Do 1 more row like this. So I put the ladder on top of my left hand needle, pull the stitch across, move it to the right hand, ladder on left hand needle, pull the stitch across, move it, ladder on left hand needle, pull the stitch over, move it across. You end up working out a technique that works best for you. Different people do it differently. I do it differently at different times. So I've done my 6 rows. I'm ready to cable again. I'm only a couple of rows away from the top, just 2. See that? I've got 2 ladders left. So I'm just going to knit my 2 ladders and then I'll show you the result of the finished cable. These are the 2 purl stitches to the right of my cable. Now I'm going to get the 4 cable knit stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then 2 purl stitches. 1, 2, and then knit to the end of the row. And here it is. A finished cable, cabled over 4 stitches every 6 rows. You can see some bigger stitches and some smaller stitches, and like I said, bit of pulling and pushing. They will all settle again. If not immediately, then when you block. But there it is. Retroactive application of a cable. And you can do this with any kind of motif. This is a cable, but you can put in ribbing. You can put in ribbing as in garter, for example. You can turn purl stitches into knit stitches or the other way around. Or pick up a dropped stitch. You just go all the way, ladder all the way down, sort out your problem and knit back up again, either 1 stitch at a time or a little row of stitches. I hope you found it useful. To a short layer cake section this week. I'm starting with the outfit that I was wearing yesterday as well. Showing off the jumper that I knitted last winter. This is the Astrid by Junko Okamoto. It is a shortish, slightly A-line shaped sweater. The way it sits on me is slightly cropped, partially because I'm tall, partially because I'm big, and I really like it. Somehow I didn't really get away with it last winter after I knitted it. I think it may have been towards the end of the winter that it was done. I don't know, I just wasn't really feeling it. But at the moment I absolutely adore it. And I want to talk you through the rest of my outfit as well. I'm wearing it with my still favourite at the moment neutral check baggies, as shown. And then in between, not just as a layer underneath the jumper, but also to separate the patterns from each other, I'm wearing a dress, and it's the regular length dress, size 1 regular, in the bitter lime colour. And what it does, first of all, it gives a nice punch of colour and it highlights some of the brighter colours in the colour work in the jumper. But it also separates, like I said, it separates the patterns from each other. And I really like how it addresses the colour balance of the whole outfit. I hope you can see what I mean with that. What I'll do is show you the same outfit, but I'll remove the dress, still wearing the jumper, so you can see that they kind of go together, but neither of them are as pleasing to the eye when you wear them right next to each other. Here it is. See what I mean? It actually really goes quite well. It actually goes better than I thought it would. However, I still really like what it does to have that punch of colour in between with the dress. So just baggies with a shortish jumper. Apart from what the colours do and how the patterns play together, the other thing I'd like to point out to you is the effect of wearing a shortish jumper, this normally I wouldn't really think of wearing with a pair of trousers, but because the baggies are so skirt-like, even though the jumper doesn't quite cover my tummy because it's loose, and then you get the looseness of the baggies underneath, I think it's a really nice combination together. And there's this unspoken rule that if you wear something loose at the bottom, it needs to be more fitted at the top and the other way around. You have to be quite careful with those rules because it is not necessarily proportionally always right. In this case, I think the kind of in and out of the garments together works really well. And the fact that I've got a very baggy bottom and a fairly oversized, I mean, it's not exactly small, it's cropped, but it's not small and fitted jumper. It's going back, I guess, to the positive ease that the jumper has on this part of my body. If it would be more fitted on me, if it would be sitting like this, I wouldn't like it half as much. See what it does? You really then see my hips sticking out, you see my sticky out tummy, and it's all like, ooh. I don't like that as much as a silhouette, not just because it shows fat, but also because it doesn't look very nice in terms of proportion. I do this and immediately I feel better because I have the feeling that bits that I don't want to emphasize they're not on display now, but they're not really hidden either. They're just kind of part of the overall look that works. And that's the kind of thing to really focus on when you go into your own wardrobe and put outfits together, so that you end up with proportions and looks that are pleasing to the eye when you look in the mirror, and they make you feel good, they make you feel comfortable. So most Layercake garments are cut in a way that they kind of skim your body without nipping you anywhere, and that's for a reason. It's to help create kind of looks and flowy looks that make you feel comfortable and really together, like this. I want to show you one other addition to this outfit. It's something that you can do with the synergy tops as well. If there are no knitted sleeves in it yet, then both the synergy top as well as the synergy duster are fabulous to wear over the top of a jumper, and having the already knitted sleeves sticking out. One of the advantages of that is that the layer of fabric gives you a layer that becomes much more difficult for wind to get through. So funnily enough, when you're wearing a jumper and you then put a synergy top without sleeves or a synergy duster over the top, it's almost like wearing a body warmer, because you'll keep the wind out more and you keep more warmth in. So apart from wind, it also a lovely extra layer inside when you're getting a little bit chilly. And it kind of goes against your instinct to say, well, how would a thin layer of linen be warmer over the top of a jumper? Well, try it. You'll feel the difference. Even if you don't have a synergy top or a synergy duster, any of the sleeved Layercakes or any sleeved loose items that you've got in your own wardrobe will work exactly the same way. So you'll be surprised how much warmer this is compared to just wearing the jumper. It also makes for a nice outfit, of course. So moving on, I was showing you the bitter lime dress, and we've just been making lots of dresses because you may know that I had a wool dress offer on going into the cooler weather. So let me show you one of those. They've turned out so well, and the first responses from people that have had their first dresses are really positive. We're getting to the end of the production run. I think the last dresses will go out like maybe the middle of next week, so then we're through them all. And let me show you one of the ones that we've made this week. Here it is, the purple herringbone, again in the regular length. I don't have a long length to show you, but you get a good idea, and immediately you can see, if I just stand still like this, how the wool, because it's a heavier fabric of course than the linen and more structured fabric, really shows off and holds the shape of the dress. I absolutely love that. Oh, by the way, for those of you who are receiving your dresses, there were some dresses that were supposed to be picked up by DPD Local on Tuesday that all went horribly wrong. The driver had one hell of a day, and the bottom line was they weren't picked up until yesterday, Thursday, the 5th. Is it today the 6th? Yeah, Thursday the 5th. So today, Friday the 6th of November, some of you will have received dresses, and this also goes for people that live abroad whose dresses will take longer to get to them. When you unpack the dress and you think, oh, it's all a bit bedraggled, this is not what I had in mind. Just put it on a hanger, hang it up. Leave it to hang overnight. Put it in your bathroom, for example, after you've had a shower or a bath. A steamy environment is good. Hang it outside overnight is good as well. So a bit of moisture will help the creasing that the dresses gain from being shipped just drop out, and then it'll look a lot better afterwards. So the structure and the look of the dress, of the wool dress. Now immediately you see that with the darker color, the light color of my trousers really stands out a lot more. Now I just grabbed this top which I had here, which actually colors beautifully with the dress. That wasn't that was more luck than planning. But if I would replace that top for a white top or a beige top, something closer to the colors in the trousers, then of course that would address the color balance of my outfit. And it's not that this is awful, but it's something to be aware of, because you can play with that. A good example is one of the, I've got all my accessories next door because I've been taking photographs. Oh, I've got this one, I guess. It's not what I wanted to show though. No, it's not quite light enough. Right, let me grab one. What I wanted to show you is something more like this, to show what then bringing up a lighter color that kind of brings back some of the coloring of the trousers does with the whole outfit. It creates a balance. You can of course go even lighter. You can go even lighter with something like this. Big shawl. Let me take this off just for demo. An even lighter color, again more like the trousers, bringing that back at the top and addressing the balance of the whole outfit in terms of color weighting, if you like. The other thing, of course, that you can do is go darker at the bottom. Let me show you some darker baggies with this outfit. So this is a pair of baggies in the multi-check, but the darker multi-check. Not only that, but also this is the baggies in the size small long rather than large long. Now, especially for those of you baggy wearers who have been wearing them for a number of years, we started with the large ones and then we added smaller ones along the way in both the longer and the regular length. The thing to keep in mind is if you look at the measurements of the baggies online, you'll see that the smaller size is not really small. I've got a bum that's a size 18 going on 20, and the small size fits around my bum easily. I can show you that actually. See, there is still room to spare, but not quite as much room And that makes a difference when you wear your baggies with different tops, of course. There's less fabric around my bum and my hips, which for this dress doesn't really make that much of a difference. But at the bottom of the dress, where it goes in a little bit, you may have a personal preference for not having quite as much fabric around your legs. And of course you then have that with these baggies. Can you see that difference? I have to keep interrupting to blow my nose and to sneeze every time at home when we blow our nose or sneeze or cough. Somebody goes, uh-oh. I mean, you gotta laugh, right? I try to anyway. Still, I haven't got a cold or anything, but there are days when I get really sensitive to dust. It's when I'm a bit more stressy. And it's not that I'm super stressed, but I've got a bit of a migraine-y thing going for the last 2 days, which really drags me down. And then I get sneezy with it. Anyway, sideline. So, where I was and what I was trying to say, being rudely interrupted when I looked down, was the different effect of having less fabric around the bottom part of your trousers with the dress going in. And like I said, it doesn't really bother me, but if you want a leaner silhouette, but you like the silhouette of the baggies, then do consider smaller size instead of the wider ones. Length, of course, no difference, but the width can make a big difference in the overall look of your outfit. What else I want to show you? Oh yes, with this darker look, you can then of course also bring in a darker jumper to change the whole mood of the outfit. Let me grab a darker jumper. Slightly darker jumper, bigger and more oversized and with long sleeves. I've made mine a bit longer than the pattern calls for, by the way, because I've got long arms and I love pulling my sleeves around my hands, especially when I'm working on the computer because my hands get cold. So it changes the kind of color balance of the outfit and makes for a lovely wintry outfit as well. The baggies, having the baggies around your legs, of course, keeps your legs from rubbing against the wool fabric. Some people aren't bothered by that, but if you don't like that, then of course just wear a pair of trousers or a pair of leggings underneath your woolly dress. And it's just to show you how well a jumper goes over the top of a wool dress. Of course you can wear your jumper underneath your wool dress as well, depending on how the jumper is cut, if it's not so big and oversized. Or if you wear a bigger sized dress, then just put your jumper underneath. I'll show you that actually. There we are. Now, this is more about showing you a jumper inside a dress than this particular jumper and this particular dress. The most important thing that I want to point out to you is that where I normally, or most of the time, wear a size 1, this is actually a size 2 dress. And the reason I put that on is because it sits completely differently in combination with a jumper like this worn underneath. Well, you saw that the jumper has some positive ease, but it doesn't have more positive ease than this dress. And that's why it sits so well underneath it. Can you see that? In terms of fit, that works really well. And like with our other Layercakes, these armholes are still big enough to kind of just drop down the side of your body. So it's not all of a sudden like, oh my God, she's wearing this huge dress. And that's something to keep in mind. And that's also something that we very often used to ask at shows. What are you planning to wear underneath? I will show you, oh, this is also the long dress, by the way. It's a size 2 long. And I love combining the large check of the wool with the small checks of the linen. I think the two go extremely well together. But that's me. That's something I particularly like. What I wanted to show you is how different this looks with that extra positive ease compared to the same jumper with the size 1 dress over the top, to show you the difference and the impact that the difference in positive ease on the two garments has. So there, after lots of pulling and pushing, there it is. So this jumper has slightly more positive ease than the dress. And you can see that really here, where you can see how it gets pulled in to my body to fit inside the dress. Now, because it's a wool dress, it's got that extra strength, and it's, you know, a bit more of a shell that keeps its space when there's bunches of fabric underneath. But the jumper really has to kind of scrunch up in order to fit underneath it. Can you see that in terms of proportions, it's just not right? The sleeves kind of stand out, and it's like, yeah, if you look at every bit, you think, I can just about get away with it, but does it look really good? No. There's just a lack of generosity in the fabric of the top layer. And even though it's not all awful, it's not as good as that other combination. That other combination, it just sits better together. It all falls better together. So that's something to keep in mind. When you're wearing an item that makes a more bulky impression, a hand knit, underneath a more structured garment, then keep in mind that those positive ease restrictions play a real part. If I want to wear this jumper underneath a dress or any garment, that garment needs to be a bit more oversized, just like the jumper is. And if I want to wear a jumper underneath a more fitted dress than this, then the jumper should be more fitted as well. As fitted as possible, really, because with a dress like this, I only have about 2 or 3 inches of positive ease around the bust. So the jumper needs to fit inside that. So the more fitted, the better. It doesn't have to be tight, but less positive ease would work a lot better, especially fitted sleeves as well. These just look like little balloons, don't they? How I can improve that again is in the following way. If I keep everything on that I've got on, but I then add this, look how it changes the proportions. The sleeves are in proportion with the rest of the duster. The duster covers the fact that the dress is more fitted around my body, and all of a sudden, forget about the fact that this all is getting very busy and very itty bitty. If the jumper would be a plain color rather than having the color work in it, you could wear this outfit and feel and look great and be really nice and warm. So it's a thing to keep in mind that with an extra layer like this over the top, sleeveless layer like this, loose sleeveless layer like this over the top, all of a sudden you're addressing the issue and you're fixing the proportions that weren't right. Okay, so this was a fairly short one again on the Layercake front. More about proportions, about working with different layers and positive ease or less positive ease, as well as addressing color balance in your outfits. If there are particular things you want me to see and discuss in future episodes about Layercake or any other parts of the podcast, let me know, and I'll hope to see you again soon.